Hi, I'm Jim Jarmusch, and this is in lieu of a commentary for the film Mystery Train, for the new release from the great folks at Criterion. So I really don't like doing a commentary over the film. I don't like to look at my films again. It's agony to me. So instead, as I've done in the past, we've gotten some questions sent to us through cyberspace, and I will attempt to answer some of them. It is January 20th, 2010. I am in New York City. It's still here, and I'm on 7th Avenue, 29th Street at Gizmo Audio on the 17th floor, but there are no windows here. So, but it's very nice outside, very mild, about 38 degrees for January. That's pretty good. So anyway, I have the New York Times here. On the headlines, we have patrolling Haiti, U.S. troops are welcomed into a void. Complaints rising over the government's collapse. There was a devastating earthquake a week ago in Haiti. I still don't understand why it took 5 days to get helicopters there with some kind of jackhammers to get people out from under the rubble. Tens of thousands are probably gone now. So anyway, I don't understand how the world works. Let's see what else is in the Times. What you saw? What in Avatar? An article on the front page about James Cameron's new movie Avatar and all kinds of things people are reading into it morally, philosophically. I have not seen it, so no comment. Anyway, that's what's in the New York Times. So let's start with my questions here. Questions sent to me. Number one is from Noah Redfield in Allendale, New Jersey. And thank you all for sending in your questions, by the way. So Noah asks, is that Zach, a.k.a. Lee Baby Sims, as the DJ, having recently made it to Memphis after skipping jail? Noah, I would say yes. He's referring to the character Tom Waits played in Down by Law, Lee Baby Sims. He returns in Mystery Train as a voice on the radio as a DJ. So I like to think it is Lee Baby Sims. Second question, Nathan Sakulik from Rochester, New York. What was the casting process like? Did you go into the film knowing what specific actors you wanted to fill the roles, or were there auditions held? Usually I write for specific characters, for specific actors. In this case, I had many of the actors in my head. I wrote for Lizzie Bracco, for Nicoletta Brosky. I wrote for Joe Strummer, Steve Buscemi. I did have some casting sessions for the two Japanese characters played by Masatoshi Nagase and Yuki Kudo. I went to Tokyo. I did want to have Yuki Kudo in the film. I had seen her in a film called Crazy Family, some other films, so I went really to meet her, but I really wanted to work with her and was lucky that I did. And I found Masatoshi Nagase in Japan, who is a wonderful actor who played Jun in the film. So those were the real characters that I cast for. A question from Alexander Denise Emile Altaras from Morristown, New Jersey. I know you are a fan of such musicians as the Ramones and Tom Waits, but what other artists in fields other than filmmaking, not just music, painting, for example, do you admire or have had a significant influence on your work? Oh man, Alexander, that's a hard one. Taking out music or painting, you did leave me literature. I'm interested in so many things. So many things have inspired me: architects, designers, philosophers, photographers like Robert Frank and Walker Evans, to Godless and Gruen, Stephanie Chernikowski, Josh Schuz, my brother, Tom Jarmusch. Writers, well, I'm a big fan of poetry, so poets from Dante to Ariosto, Boccaccio, Chaucer, Shakespeare, the sonnets of Shakespeare. I do have a theory that Shakespeare was a hoax, and I really believe that he didn't write that stuff, but that's a long story. But anyway, there's Blake and Keats and French poets, Mallarmé and Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Sandrard, Roussel. Americans, Emily Dickinson, Whitman, Poe, Hart Crane, Wallace Stevens, William Carlos Williams. Also, the New York School of Poets have been very important to me. Two of them were my teachers, Kenneth Koch and David Shapiro. Other poets, though, from the so-called New York School, Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery, James Schuyler, Ron Padgett, very important to me. A lot of crime fiction writers like Charles Willeford, James M. Cain, Jim Thompson, Elmore Leonard, novels of Beckett, particularly his novels, Faulkner, Genet. One of my favorite books ever is Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy, 18th century novel. Oh man, current writers like Jonathan Latham, Luc Sant, the French writer Jean-Jacques Schul, Nick Tasches. Then many scientists are very important to me in their thoughts, their contributions. Pythagoras, Copernicus, Galileo, Tesla, Stephen Hawking, a French nuclear physicist who's currently working, Michel Cassé. Oh man, and then there are all kinds of other people in other fields. I'm an amateur mycologist, mushroom identification, so people like Gary Linkoff and Paul Stamets have been very inspiring. Other writers like Naomi Klein and Howard Zinn, Noam Chomsky. Man, I don't know. There's so many things that inspire me, and they're not just people. And contributions made by people I don't even know, like the people mapping the human genome or working on stem cell research. E.O. Wilson was very inspiring to me. So that is a lot of people there. I don't know how to answer you, but that's just a start. Reed Kavanaugh from Nashville, Tennessee asks several questions. One of them was, is that Roberto Benigni in the casket? Oh man, I hope not. I never thought of it that way. That is his wife in real life, Nicoletta Braschi, in the film, bringing her husband, his corpse, back to Italy from Memphis for some unknown reason. But I don't want to think that's Roberto. John Weddell from Northumberland, England. Dearest Jim, Mystery Train shows the Joe Strummer character and his cronies hanging out in a bar or pool hall. It's actually both, called Shades. And on his Heart Attack and Vine album, Tom Waits has an instrumental track called In Shades. Could you tell me if there's any connection, please? It's pretty trivial, but I've wondered about it for years. Well, nothing's trivial, John. Everything is trivial. Actually, Shades came from a bar that I was never in, that was in Westfield, New Jersey, called Shades, that Sarah Driver used to hang out in, I guess, as an underage teenager. So she told me about it, and she always loved the name Shades. So the bar, pool hall in the film was called Shades. Not a connection intentionally to Tom Waits' track. Josiah Johnson from Aurora, Illinois, or Josiah, asks, Jim, on balance, are you an Elvis man or a Perkins man? In the film, they're arguing often, the two Japanese characters, about Elvis versus Carl Perkins. Well, I have to say that I'm a Carl Perkins man musically. I think what he did for rock and roll was a bit more, in a way, innovative than Elvis, in a certain way, a little bit more pure. I really love the rockabilly style of Carl Perkins. But at the same time, I have to say, vocally, you cannot discount the angelic beauty of Elvis's voice. I particularly love some of his gospel stuff that he did, and man, that cat had a voice on him. So anyway, I guess I'm a Carl Perkins man, but I really love Elvis's voice. David Heslin from Melbourne, Australia asks, I thought the strongest segment of Mystery Train was the one featuring the Japanese couple. Was the majority of their dialogue written by you and then translated into Japanese? How much was improvised by the actors? Well, I wrote the dialogue for the characters. I had a translator who helped me. The actors also helped just to make sure their dialogue, once translated in Japanese, was vernacular and appropriate. I have little intertitles, as I recall, for each story, and the first one is called Far from Yokohama. When I wrote the script, it was called Far from Osaka. Osaka is kind of a rock and roll city in Japan, in a way. So I wanted them initially to be from Osaka, but after talking with the translators and actors, the accent in Japanese in Osaka is very particular. The two actors were from Tokyo, so rather than have them do a forced kind of fake accent, I decided to just change that segment's title to Far from Yokohama and maintain their kind of Tokyo accents. So decisions like this were very helpful, but the dialogue, they were not really improvising dialogue because it was in Japanese and I kind of needed to know what the hell they were saying. The next question is from Clint Hughes, Midland, Texas. What is your favorite Elvis, i.e. young Elvis, Army Elvis, comeback special Elvis, Vegas Elvis, Fat Elvis, etc., and why? Well, I guess I would say young Elvis up to 1956 is for me the real Elvis. I remember John Lennon said Elvis died the day he went into the Army. His entering the Army was not his idea. He didn't even want to go in the Army, but Colonel Parker thought it was a good move for his career. So poor Elvis went to the Army, went to Germany, got his beautiful hair cut off, and sort of spiraled down as far as innovation. However, I do like the comeback special Elvis, musically and visually. The black leather suit, all that's pretty cool. And I do like the so-called fat Elvis. I like the late Vegas-y Elvis as well. I like seeing him sing In the Ghetto and that stuff, with the big Ming the Merciless collar and the white jumpsuit, and that's kind of cool too. Devin Ruland from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, a very severe and beautiful place, asks, how exactly did Joe Strummer and Screamin' Jay Hawkins come to work on the film? Also, based on your work with them in this film and Tom Waits in your other work, is there anything different or unique about directing the acting of musicians as opposed to career actors? Well, I'm not very hierarchical about where, what actors' experience is. Some musicians can be great actors. It's all circumstantial. It's all about collaboration. I think you could make a great character collaborating with someone with no experience or with someone who has a vast amount of experience. It's all about getting them to trust you and to feel relaxed and to react as a character rather than act things out. So I had the great fortune to work with a lot of musicians. In fact, a lot of the people I worked with early on were musicians, essentially. John Lurie in Stranger Than Paradise. Also Esther Ballant is a musician. Richard Edson, who was in that film, is a musician from the band Conch and the first drummer of Sonic Youth. So I've worked with other musicians as well. You see Iggy, Tom Waits, RZA, Jizza, Strummer, Rufus Thomas, etc. But I can't say there's anything specific. I look at it all as an individual collaboration between me and a single actor. So I don't think there's anything unique. Musicians who perform live obviously have a sense of performing something, but that's not necessarily translatable to acting in a film. So to me, it's really an instinctive thing about whether I think I could make a good character with a particular person. Joe Wakeman from Brooklyn, New York. Jim, can you introduce me to Winona Ryder? No. Just to protect her, I would not, Joe. I've heard about you. No, actually, Winona Ryder is a remarkable person. I haven't been in touch with her for a while, but sort of thinking about her lately and missing her. But no, Joe, I will not introduce you to Winona. Next question is from Jack Gattanella from Teaneck, New Jersey. We're getting a lot from Jersey. Jack asks, how did you figure out what music to use in the film? Was it hard leaving some music out that you really wanted, or did you get to use everything you intended? Well, man, I was drawn to make this film in the first place by the musical heritage of Memphis. So that is so deep and broad and amazing that, of course, I couldn't put everything I would like to have put in the film. But I think we had a very nice soundtrack with a nice overview. We had Mystery Train, both versions, by Elvis version and the Junior Parker version, the beautiful version of Blue Moon by Elvis. We had Otis Redding, Pain in My Heart, which is a version of a song by Irma Thomas, Ruler of My Heart, a beautiful version by Otis. We had Domino, Roy Orbison. We had Rufus Thomas, The Memphis Train. We had a really amazing track that I love by Bobby Blue Bland, Get Your Money Where You Spend Your Time. We had Soul Finger by the Bar-Kays. So we did have a lot of stuff on there. Of course, there's a lot of stuff I could have made. I could have made a 5 CD, 5 vinyl disc version of music for the film, but that's what we got. So I was happy with what we did have in the film. John Dambacher from L.A. asks, sorry if that's not your right pronunciation, but John asks, from the moment you start writing to the moment you finish editing, in what way does your unconscious work into the style and finish of your films? Man, asking questions to my unconscious mind, that's a hard question. It's a good question. It's a mystery to me. Intuition is very important to me. Again, I'm not analytical. I don't know where things come from. I'm not interested in demystifying like how things come to your unconscious, but I do pay a lot of attention to my unconscious, my semi-conscious. When I'm writing something, I keep a notebook by my bed, so if I have an idea in the middle of the night, I write it down, or I have a small tape recorder or something. So I do pay attention to dreams and to small things, and I just gather things and collect them. And essentially then, after I have a collection of a lot of ideas, I sketch them into a kind of narrative. So those things are very important. It's an excellent question. It's not a very good answer because it remains mysterious to me. So I like to keep it that way. Here's an interesting question from Matthias Nielsen, Vesterbro, Copenhagen, Denmark, Europe. Dear Jim, what I gather from Mystery Train is that you wanted to recreate the old Elvis-era Memphis, and as a result, all modernity has been erased from the landscape. You know, the buildings and streets are there, but no signs of modern life, shopping, traffic, and so on. You've sort of removed all life from Memphis so that it's become a ghost town. It reminded me of Antonioni's films where the protagonists are lost and drift around in barren landscapes. So my question is this: was this indeed what you were heading for when you made the movie, a 50s rock and roll version of Antonioni, Oh, I like that. Or were you at least inspired by him? Thanks, and keep up your great work. Thanks, Matthias. The truth is, it wasn't so abstracted from what Memphis really looked like and felt like when we shot there in 1988. We did not really look for abandoned places. We did very little control of the streets, of keeping people out. I did look for locations that were somewhat, I don't know, bleak in a way, or somehow barren, but Memphis really felt like that. The whole area around Beale Street, which used to be the crossroads of Black America and was a thriving population, was basically razed after there were riots in Memphis in 1968 after the assassination there of Martin Luther King. So they basically razed that whole section of the city, which contained incredible amounts of history, especially musical history and Black American culture. So that's all gone, man. There was nothing there. There was still a kind of touristy Beale Street as there is now, but there was no neighborhood left. And so a lot of Memphis really looked like that. I haven't been back there recently, so I'm not quite sure what it looks like now. But this was not so much of an abstraction as maybe just choices we made in places to shoot. But the truth is, it's pretty damn close to what Memphis felt like. And there wasn't a lot of street life. There wasn't a lot of activity. And Memphis did kind of feel like a ghost town, and man, I felt a lot of ghosts there, especially from musical history. But just to give you one example about how kind of decimated Memphis felt, there is a moment where they pass a building where you see graffitied on it Stax, and this was actually the Stax building of Stax Records, where so many incredible gifts came out of. Now, that building, I believe before it was Stax, was a movie theater or a theater. It became Stax Studios, and it was like that when we filmed. We didn't graffiti Stax on there. Someone had. That was the only thing identifying it as Stax. There was no plaque. There was no idea of preserving it. The building was torn down maybe a year or so after we filmed in Memphis, and I'm very honored that someone in Memphis, when Stax was torn down, sent me in the mail a brick from Stax Studio, which I still have and is very valuable to me. I know that Stax still exists as a school of music in Memphis. I don't know if they refurbished the same building. I think it may be a different building, but I'm not completely sure about that. But the original Stax was torn down, and I got the brick to prove it. But there is something good in the name of Stax that's continuing in Memphis, so I didn't want to give the impression that the soul of Stax, the spirit of Stax, was gone, because it is not, and it will never be. Greg Humphrey. I don't know where you're from, Greg, but you probably don't either. Greg says, I would like to know if the scenes between Screamin' Jay Hawkins and Sankey Lee were completely scripted, or were the actors ad-libbing, improvising some of their dialogue. Let me see if I can remember. There's a scene with a plum that is somewhat improvised. I think it was improvised. A kind of funny scene I vaguely remember. Again, I haven't seen the film since 1989, so bear with my fading memory. But there was some improvisation there. Of course, their reactions and actions are always, the actors always have an element of improvisation in general. But their other dialogue was written, so they weren't really improvising dialogue, as I recall. With the exception of the plum scene, and I'm not sure there's a whole lot of dialogue besides Sankey Lee saying, hey, that's my plum. So that's the answer to your question. Mark Simon Hayden asks, I caught a mention of Tav Falco's unapproachable Panther Burns in the thank yous at the end of the film. I wonder if they played any part in making the film, whether Tav's documentary films of old Memphis juke joints or any of his music served as research or inspiration. Let's see if I can remember. I did meet Tav in Memphis. I'm not sure if I had met him previously in New York. I was aware of his music. Quite an amazing character, Tav Falco. I do think that I saw some of his juke joint footage after we made the film, but not before. But I did hang out with Tav a little bit when we were in Memphis. I also bought from him at that time a 1967 Triumph Twin motorcycle. He had custom painted black and white with a solo seat. I still have this motorcycle, although it's not been running for some years. I prefer to ride my trusty 1978 Yamaha SR 500 single. But I do have this beautiful old motorcycle that was Tav Falco's. I remember bringing it back from Memphis in the back of a rented pickup truck. But Tav Falco's, anyone that doesn't know Panther Burns might want to check out that music. Ian Schultz from Leeds in the UK asks, how did you decide to cast Joe Strummer in Mystery Train, and was it because you worked with him on the legendary Straight to Hell? Will there be automatic subtitles in the Far From Yokohama segment in the new Criterion, unlike the old DVD? Second question first. Yeah, there was a problem with the titles on the original release that sometimes appeared and mysteriously didn't other times. This has now been fixed. Criterion would not let that happen. So there will be titles that will be accessible in case you don't speak Japanese. How did you decide to cast Strummer? I knew Joe Strummer for some time before making this film. I knew him for some time actually before making being in the film Straight to Hell, the Alex Cox film. I wanted to work with Joe as an actor. I was interested in his abilities as an actor. I love his performance in Mystery Train. Yes, I did hang out a lot with Joe during the filming of Straight to Hell, Alex Cox's film, which was shot in Almeria, south of Spain, where they shot all the spaghetti westerns. I recently returned there for my last film, The Limits of Control, and shot outside of Almeria in the mountains. Strummer was in a film by a French director, a friend of mine, Osang. He was in a film of Aki Kaurismäki's, several films of Alex Cox. So I was interested in his interest as an actor, and I'm very happy that I got to have him in Mystery Train, playing the part of Elvis. Not that Elvis, but his Elvis. Jay Luna from Kansas City, Missouri. Long ago I read in an interview that you were planning on making 3 movies about cities whose music you enjoyed. They were going to be called New Orleans, Memphis, and Kansas City. The first 2 became Down by Law and Mystery Train. Whatever happened to the Kansas City project? Do you still have any desire to shoot a movie in Kansas City? There are far too few films set here, and it has saddened me for some time to think that Kansas City was the Jarmusch Music City movie that never was. Well, I don't have any plans at the moment to make a film in Kansas City, not presently. We are very lucky we have Robert Altman's very underappreciated film, Kansas City, a great musical city. So I don't know if that'll ever happen or not, Jay. Man, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Przemysław Placek from Berlin says Jalacey Hawkins, a.k.a. Screamin' Jay Hawkins, was a really good cast, in my opinion. His acting seems really natural. Why didn't he consider acting in more than just a handful of movies? And how did he get his role in Mystery Train? Wow, I have a lot of great Screamin' Jay stories. I can't go into them all. I met Jay after I used his music in my film Stranger Than Paradise, his recording of I Put a Spell on You. I found out that the money that I had to pay to use his music in my film, to license it, did not go to him. So he no longer owned the rights. So that kind of disturbed me. When the film made back its money, and when I first got some money from the film, I went on a search to find Screamin' Jay. I found him living actually in a trailer in New Jersey with no telephone. He was not doing very well financially. I was able to give him some money that he was not expecting, and he was very, very appreciative of that. It enabled him to move into another house. He eventually moved for a while to California, and we stayed friends for till his death. In fact, we used to talk on the phone regularly, even when he moved to Paris, and I really became so fond of him. I considered him almost to be like my strange uncle, and I just love Screamin' Jay. He was really a character. I don't know if you're aware of his website about how many children he fathered. I think it's up to about 40 now. I'm not sure. They proved this by DNA. He was a very busy man. He called me many times before coming to Memphis asking me whether he should bring Henry. Now, if you're a Screamin' Jay fan, you know that Henry is a skull on top of a stick, a kind of cane that Screamin' Jay used on stage and kept with him. He would call me every other day saying, should I bring Henry or should I not bring Henry? And I kept saying, it's up to you. I don't think Henry will be in the film. And he would say, good, I'm tired of Henry. I don't want to bring Henry. So then he'd call the next day saying, I got to bring Henry. He goes everywhere. I just would say, Jay, man, it's up to you. So he did bring Henry. But anyway, Screamin' Jay was really one incredible gift to us all. There's an interesting film about Screamin' Jay, a documentary that was made by a young Greek director some years ago. I don't know the title. I don't know how to find it. I do have a copy, but I should have looked up the title. Anyway, if you can find that, you should check it out. But a remarkable human being and performer. He had such an amazing voice, really an operatic type of voice. His dream was to be an opera singer. Paul Robeson was his hero, but somehow he veered into his very particular R&B mode, and just so happy to have everything I can get my hands on that he ever recorded. I have another little anecdote, though, about Jay while we were shooting. We were shooting some scene in, I forget which one exactly, and the streets were dry, and we had shot half of the scene, and then it rained, and we couldn't continue shooting with the rain. So it was raining. We had to stop shooting. So Jay called me into, I guess we were in the lobby of that hotel where we were filming, and he said, do you want me to throw the bones? And I said, I don't know. What do you mean, Jay? And he said, I can throw some bones and make it stop raining. And I was like, really? All right, man, throw some bones. So he took out a small little velvet bag or leather bag. It had some little chips and little bones in it. And he, shook them in his hands and tossed them onto the surface of a table. And he looked at it very carefully and he said, okay, it's going to stop raining now. So I said, Jay, thanks for throwing the bones. I looked outside. It was still raining. About 3 minutes later, the rain completely stopped. The light came back, and we had to go and kind of mop up the streets to disguise the wet look of it. And the whole entire crew helped do that. I remember it was kind of hilarious. Everyone on their hands and knees mopping up a street. But Jay rolled those bones and stopped it from raining. One more crazy Screamin' Jay thing of many, though, man. He used to buy a certain type of fried chicken in Memphis from one of the fried chicken places. I forget which one. but he always had to go to that specific one. And I was in his room once, and I asked him, "So you really like that particular chicken?" And he said, "Yeah, because that chicken's got so many preservatives in it, man. I can keep it for 4 days in a drawer." And he opened a drawer that was full of chicken. And so he honed in on a very heavily preserved chicken that he could keep in a drawer in his hotel room. Sam Smith from Lawrence, Kansas, the last home of the great William Burroughs. Sam asks, "Why do you think it's so easy to fall in love with trains?" Why is it easy to fall in love with trains? Because trains have hallucinatory properties for me. The way they sound from a distance. I still have that haunting memories of being a child and hearing trains go by in the distance in the night. The way trains sound when you're inside them. The kind of gentle motion of trains. Trains for this film became a kind of metaphor as well for me. Even the structure of the film, the three parts, I thought of as kind of like train cars, you know? Each section or each train car being a chapter or a stanza or something. So, yeah, I don't know. Trains are very, very hallucinatory and evocative to me, to everyone, I think. Ian Sellinger in Scarsdale, New York, asks a number of questions. First, what came first in the process? Memphis, the triptych of stories, Screamin' Jay Hawkins, or Joe Strummer? I think what came first was Memphis, just the idea of shooting something, of creating something that would take place in Memphis, a place I had never been when I wrote the film, but I was steeped in the musical history of Memphis, so I don't know. Memphis was the first thing, and next came the kind of structure and the actors that I wanted to write for. So it kind of happened in that order. Did you happen to read Mystery Train, Images of America in Rock and Roll Music, which I came across because of a section about my favorite band, The Band? Yeah, that's a book by Grail Marcus from the mid-'70s, I think. And it's a book that I read. As I recall, there's a section about the band, a section about Sly Stone, who made one of the greatest records of all time, in my opinion. There's a riot going on. Randy Newman, and a section on Elvis. So that, yes, the very fascinating writer, Grail Marcus. Other books, if you were interested in that, man, I would recommend the books of Peter Guralnick, Sweet Soul Music, Lost Highway, and another one I think called Feel Like Going Home. But yes, Mystery Train, an excellent book. It wasn't the reason I titled the film that, of course. I think we titled our book and film for similar reasons. Larry De Silveira from San Diego. He asks several questions, one of which is, I recently learned that Richard Bowes, who died in February 2009, published 2 books and was a Vietnam veteran. How did you get to know him, and what about him made you want to cast him in several of your films? Richard Bowes, yes, he died last February. He was a very close friend of mine. We met in film school. He was in all of my films up to and including Night on Earth, sometimes just in a small role. It was kind of a good luck thing for me to have him somewhere in the films. He's in all my first films, all those films. And yes, he wrote 2 books. One was called Last Train Out, and another book called The Last Dead Soldier Left Alive. These books were published, I think, by iUniverse in Nebraska. Anyway, check them out. It's Richard Bowes, B-O-E-S. Yeah, I miss him. I'm very proud that he was my friend and that he appears in so many of my films. Larry also asks some other interesting questions. how did it feel to film in Sun Studios? Did you feel the ghosts of Elvis or Howlin' Wolf? You know, I kind of did feel ghosts in that place of Jerry Lee and Roy Orbison and Howlin' Wolf. And, you know, it's just one little room with a control room in the back. On some of the old Sun recordings, you can hear trucks going by in the background. And it still felt like that. Yeah, it's a remarkable place. I really did, I don't know if I imagined it, but I really did feel a ghostly presence of some of my, musical heroes there. One more question from Larry. Did you know that there is a Happy Mondays music video that pays homage to Mystery Train? You know, I didn't know that until or maybe I did because I did recall seeing it, but I looked on YouTube after getting your question a few days ago, and so I did remember seeing it, but I'm a big fan of the whole Manchester scene, certainly starting with Joy Division. I love the Mondays, the consequent group Black Grape, Stone Roses, just an incredible band. So I was very happy to realize there was a Happy Mondays kind of reference to Mystery Train. One more question, also from Larry. I recognized a couple of allusions to the Canterbury Tales in the movie after reading an interview with you citing it as an influence. Besides having a Chaucer Street in the movie, or as Yuki Kudo pronounces it, Chaucer Street, and the young people making a religious pilgrimage, are there any other references? Hey, man, Larry, aren't those enough? Yeah, well, Chaucer certainly was an important inspiration for the reasons you already cited. I can't think of any other references to Chaucer other than those things, but Chaucer's Canterbury Tales remains an incredibly beautiful work, both structurally, with people telling stories on a pilgrimage, also for his use of language and a kind of vernacular language that was unprecedented in English before Chaucer. Certainly, we know that Dante broke down a lot of walls by using vernacular Italian. So, yes, Chaucer's a big inspiration for the reasons you cited. Jim Galvin from Elgin, Illinois. He has a few questions. One of them is, in your film Coffee and Cigarettes, the RZA and Jizza talk about how they always have to wait on Ghost. Is this a reference to the rapper Ghostface Killer or the character in your previous film Ghost Dog? I think it's Ghost Dog. What do you say? Well, you know, I like that you think it's Ghost Dog. Of course, it can be Ghost Dog. I'm not sure. I think that they were referring to Ghostface because, having hung out with the Wu-Tang, Ghostface is often the last to show up. So I think they were talking about Ghostface, but hey, it's a movie, so they don't say. So I like to think that it's Ghost Dog now that you mention it. Oh yeah, Jim also asks, finally, are you planning any records or tours with Bad Rabbit? Bad Rabbit is our band. It's me and Carter Logan and Shane Stoneback. Let's see, we made some little instrumental recordings that were film music for The Limits of Control, but since then we have completed a new record, a new album, not purely instrumental, mostly with vocals, but that should be out soon. Maybe by the time this DVD of Mystery Train is out, our record will be out, or maybe it will come out as a series of EPs. We're not quite sure yet, but we just finished mixing and mastering all the stuff, so it's almost ready to go. Would we tour? You know, we all have other stuff we do. We definitely want to play live. I'm not sure if touring would be the right word, but maybe micro-touring. We definitely would like to play some live performances. but we would be very particular about them. Our audience is probably a kind of particular rock and roll stoner type of audience, so we would want to play places for those people. We also are not looking to go out in the street and try to drum up interest in our band. It's not really our way, so our choices of where we play and when would be pretty particular. You would never find Bad Rabbit playing a gig outdoors in the daylight, for example. Stefan Ramstedt from Stockholm. Hi, Jim, would you be so kind and name some of your favorite train films? Oh, man. Wow. That's a big genre. So many beautiful images of trains in the history of cinema. Well, let's see. Being a huge Buster Keaton fan, one of my favorite, possibly my favorite American film director, I would certainly have to mention The General from 1927. There's also a beautiful train sequence in the very beginning section of Buster's film Go West, which I think was the previous year, 26. What other great train films? Howard Hawks' film 20th Century with John Barrymore is just an amazingly funny and beautiful film, almost all on a train. Let's see, Strangers on a Train. I'm not a huge Hitchcock fan, but I love that film. It's not all on a train, obviously, but the beginning section is on a train, and that is one of my favorite Hitchcock films from the incredible book by Patricia Highsmith. Let's see, other directors. Of course, there's Some Like It Hot. It's got a lot of train stuff on it. Not one of my favorites of his films, but let's see. Kurosawa had a beautiful sequence in a train. I think it was in, man, I can't remember if it's in Stray Dog or High and Low, where someone has to pass a briefcase off on a moving train. There's some great train sequences in Preston Sturgis's film Sullivan's Travels. One of my favorite film directors, Claire Denis, the French filmmaker, made a 10-minute film for one of the compilations of 10 Minutes Older, which all took place on a train and referenced La Chinoise by Jean-Luc Godard. So there's that little Claire Denis film is very beautiful. Wim Wenders has had some beautiful sequences on trains. I recently revisited his film Wrong Move, which has some beautiful train stuff. He filmed on trains in The American Friend and Alice in the Cities. Ozu, there's some train sequences in Ozu. So, man, that's a hard question. Oh, there was also a really cool film maybe 5-10 years ago, a documentary about hobo culture, but like young people riding trains. And there were a couple of Tom Waits songs on the soundtrack, train songs. I can't remember the name of that film, but it was a documentary about jumping trains and the current culture of people riding trains with those Tom Waits songs. It's a good thing you didn't ask me about train songs because, man, I'd really spin out with Jimmy Reed and Johnny Cash, Hank Williams, Tom Waits. Let's see, James Brown. There was the Little Feat song, Two Trains, Party Train. Was that by Cameo? I don't know. Anyway, lots of amazing train songs, lots of amazing train films. So you kind of threw me there. I don't have a complete list of great train films, but those are a few. Kyle Watson from L.A. asks, being your first color film with a proper budget, yeah, my very first film, Permanent Vacation, was in color, but it did not have a proper budget. It was made for $12,000. But, okay, being your first color film with a proper budget, was there anything you did specifically with the color design to define, enhance characters or spaces. Screamin' Jay's bright red jacket, for example, and how, if at all, did it alter your work with Robbie Mueller and the selection of lights used? Also, he asks, seriously, who or what, she or he asks, seriously, who or what is Mr. Baby? Okay, Mr. Baby, I'll answer that first. That's written on the back of Yuki Kudo's character's leather jacket in red. Mr. Baby, I have a red vinyl record from the 60s by a Japanese band called The Launchers, or as they would probably say, the Ranchos. And it's kind of a venture-style record. It has a really cool cover. I had this record before I made the film, and there was one track on the record with a vocal, and it was called Mr. Baby. And it was one of those Japanese things. All I can remember is a chorus of, ooh, Mr. Baby. So it was called Mr. Baby, which I always thought was very funny. And Japanese have a very funny, amusing to me way of using English for things. I remember being in Tokyo and seeing, I think, a line of clothing that was called High-Heeled Life of Emotional Boy. And I just love that kind of strange use of English. I remember a club or a shop or something in Tokyo that was called My Formal Queen. So I just love that kind of stuff. So Mr. Baby was a kind of, I don't know, it just stuck with me from the Launchers record on red vinyl. And so Mr. Baby was on her jacket. Your question about colors, it was very important to me at the time. Well, not your question wasn't very important, but what you're asking about. Color design was very important during the designing of Mystery Train. Specifically, as you mentioned, the color red, that Mr. Baby on her back is in red. There's a scene with red lipstick with the two Japanese characters. Their suitcase is red. Screamin' Jay's jacket is bright red. There were a lot of things in red throughout the film. This was a kind of color code, and there's no real reasoning behind it except to have certain objects, or if there was a specific reason, I no longer remember it. But I know we were very, very careful with selecting a lot of red objects. Even the little point-and-shoot camera the Japanese characters have is red. There were other colors that were very important, like the specific color of blue at magic hour, at dusk and dawn, the sky. When it's in between dark and light blue was very important to me at the time. So, you know, having worked the previous two films, having worked in black and white, I was hyper aware of using color in the film. So, yeah, we spent a lot of time designing it, and what is it supposed to mean? I'm not sure I ever knew or if I remember, but I know a lot of time was spent on it. Bart Courtwright from Pittsburgh, PA, asks, you mentioned on the Night on Earth Criterion release, thank you for listening to it, that you watch a film a day. Before watching a film, do you research it? If so, how in-depth and what sources do you use? If a film is released in the way a film is released by Criterion, do you read the supplements before, after, or before and after viewing a film? Well, you know, I don't like to do too much research. I just follow my attractions to, I don't know, kind of like a kid in a candy store. You know, I'm a film fanatic. I'm always devouring films as well as music and books and stuff. So, you know, it's strange. I might fix on a certain actor, and then I just want to see every film that Anne Margaret was in, or Warren Oates, or, you know, it might be a director I get obsessed with. I have to see everything Tony Richardson directed, or Mario Bava, or it could be subjects like recently I was getting obsessed with rodeo films, or surfing films or films about mountain men or saxophone players or, So, yeah, I don't really do too much research. I just kind of follow my instincts and just kind of devour these things based on sometimes very odd reasons. So I don't really, check the things out before, and then afterwards, like in the case of the Criterion releases, there's often so much cool stuff on it that I check it out. But I don't like listening to it or researching stuff really before I see the film. Bart also says, sometimes before seeing a film, I will have a positive or negative feeling towards the film given its director and or actors. Do you ever do this? Would films be different if they didn't have credits attached to them? Well, that's a good idea, I'm subject to the same thing. Sometimes I have illogical prejudices against directors or actors or subjects, which is kind of really something that potentially would prevent me from finding things that are amazing. So I don't know. I kind of like the idea. Maybe credits are a bad thing, Maybe it'd be better if you had to watch the entire film and only get the credits at the end. There are some films like that, of course, but yeah, I don't know. Interesting idea. The hell with credits. Just give us the damn film. Benjamin Jungert from Nuremberg, Germany, asks, music has always been an important part in your films. It ranges from classical music to hip-hop, punk, ska, and many more genres. Where do you get your variegated musical inspiration from, and what genre is left to explore? Maybe minimal music, free jazz, or krautrock. Well, my musical inspiration comes from the history of music in all genres. I just am open to them all. I don't care if it's classical music, avant-garde music, funk music, so-called world music, which is kind of ridiculous. So, I take stuff from anywhere that moves me. I'm constantly open. I have explored minimal music and free jazz. I'm a big fan of outside jazz. Albert Ayler, who was from Cleveland, I'm a huge fan of his work. He had a huge inspiration on Coltrane. Of course, the early Ornette stuff, the Art Ensemble of Chicago, that kind of stuff. I've also explored krautrock, so those things are not foreign to me. The only genre I gotta say that I have no interest in whatsoever is kind of Broadway show tune kind of stuff, And a lot of mass audience pop music even sounds like that to me. So that's something that drives me up the wall. But otherwise, man, I'm open to all forms of music, and I may only receive or appreciate a small percentage of any genre, but I'm always looking for that percentage. Benjamin also asks, your films are like a long meditation to me, although I'm not yet enlightened. He says enlightened. Don't catch fire. Are there certain philosophers who influenced your sight on the world? Philosophers. Well, I'm a big fan of Diogenes, one of my favorite philosophers. Seneca was interesting to me. Siddhartha Gautama, who we know as the Buddha, is a great philosopher for me. Let's see, Yamamoto Tsunetomo, who wrote the Hagakure, the book of philosophy that I used quotations from throughout Ghost Dog. Let's see, Black Elk, for me, is a philosopher. But I take philosophy from a lot of places. I'll give you my two favorite philosophical quotes. One is from Oscar Wilde, who said, "Life is far too important to be taken seriously." And another great philosophical quote for me comes from Mike Tyson, who said, "Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face." So I find philosophy in a lot of places. Will Rutledge from Toronto in Canada asks, "For some reason I see a lot of Michael Ritchie's Prime Cut in your work. Knowing you're a fan of Lee Marvin, I was wondering if this film had any influence on you." Prime Cut, yes, that's a movie with Lee Marvin and Gene Hackman from 1972. I love that movie, Prime Cut. It's brutal, and Lee Marvin is amazing. It's also Sissy Spacek's first film. It's a film where they're selling girls, naked girls, like cattle, and it's a kind of mob movie. But anyway, Lee Marvin is great, and Gene Hackman. So, yes, I love that film. Again, I don't know how to say how much of an influence it is on me, but being a Lee Marvin fan, I definitely recommend it. Another great performance by Lee Marvin is a kind of obscure film from the mid-'50s by Richard Fleischer called Violent Saturday, which I also recommend just for Lee's performance. A couple of great scenes. It's got Victor Mature and Ernest Borgnine in it. And, of course, my all-time favorite that I'm sure you know well, Point Blank from John Borman from '67. Really the greatest Lee Marvin performance for my money. But Prime Cut is definitely worth checking out, and thanks for your question. Okay, this is our last question from John H. Nomedal, or Nomedal, from Grimstad, Norway. John, thank you. He writes, "Hi, Mr. Jarmusch." Hey, you can call me Jim, John. Are you more or less involved with the editing of a picture compared to the sound design? I noticed that you have primarily varied between Melody London and Jay Rabinowitz as your editor on your films. How do you work with your editors? Do you let them, quote, play jazz, cut their own version of the film before you come into the cutting room? Or do you supervise the post-production more closely, like approve each freshly cut scene before the editor can move on to the next? Have you ever spontaneously taken a co-editor job on one of your films because time was running out? And my last question, do you prefer cutting digitally compared to the old-school manual way of cutting films? You can use Mystery Train as an example. Well, there's a lot of questions in there. I am very involved in the editing. To me, shooting a film is like capturing things, gathering things, collecting things. Editing is when you make a film out of them. So I am in the editing room every day. I am involved in every cut made in the film. I am a bit overbearing in a way with my ideas, or have been in the past. I am the one who will choose the takes of each actor for every moment of the film rather than the editor, because I worked with them to collaborate. They weren't on the set, and it's really, I trust my instinct to pick those moments to shape the actor's performance. Having said that, though, I am learning to be less controlling as I continue to work particularly with Jay Rabinowitz, who is an extraordinarily gifted editor. So I am more and more open to Jay's ideas and letting him show me things. Often I do not, I encourage the editor, in the case of working with Jay all these years, I encourage him to cut anything he wants while I'm shooting the film, to make his version of the film. But then I rarely will look at it, because sometimes when we're cutting a scene and I get confused or stuck and I'm trying to find a way to do something, then I might say, Jay, show me your initial cut, you know? But his initial cut is made before we've even talked about anything. I'm still in the trenches shooting the film. So, you know, sometimes we'll look at stuff that Jay's done and get an idea from it. But Jay has brought an enormous amount of ideas to my films, particularly beginning with Ghost Dog, where there were quite a lot of opticals in the film that I didn't have a lot of familiarity with working with or desire to incorporate into the language of a film before. And Jay was my guide in that way. So I'm learning to step back a little. Now sometimes I'll just have Jay cut a scene and then I'll leave and leave him alone and come back and look at it. But I am kind of a pain in the ass because I'm all over it and I'm always, in the editing room. So, but we have a very good relationship working. Jay is also the music editor on all the films we've done together. He's a remarkable music editor. The sound design comes from somewhere else. It comes from our ideas, Jay and mine together, and then collaborating with some amazing people. I've had the great pleasure to work with Bob Hine and Chick Ciccolini, incredible sound designers. So they will bring a lot of things to the film. Sound is incredibly important to me. If a film is not a silent film, then sound is 50% of what you receive. And so sound is as important to me as the image. Your last question here was, do you prefer cutting digitally compared to the old school manual way of cutting films? I cut Stranger Than Paradise in my tenement apartment on an upright moviola. After that, I moved on to Steenbecks and stuff like that. My first digitally cut film was Dead Man. And, they are both just tools. They are different. Digital is faster. You can save things. You can save various versions of a certain scene or a whole cut of a film. In the old school way, you'd have to take it all apart and do another version, so that is a great advantage for digital. There were advantages to manual cutting. One was just the kind of physical labor, there's something good about that. When I used to cut on an upright moviola, really it's like driving a vehicle with the standard transmission. So there's a lot of physical kind of stuff involved that, I don't know, affects how you think and how you cut a film. So it's a little abstract. Also, when we used to cut things that way, sometimes if I worked with an editor other than myself, I could say, well, try this version and cut it this way now. So I would have time to leave the room, take a walk, think about it while they had to do that. And sometimes that time to think, which you don't need anymore with digital cutting, became very valuable in a funny way. So it's kind of abstract, Now cutting on digital, I don't have any desire to go back to working in the manual way, but there were positives to that as well. But they're all just tools that enable you to make your film, all the stuff you've gathered into a film. So, and I've been very lucky to work first with Melody London and now for many years with Jay Rabinowitz, who has magical hands of liquid somehow, like he can make anything work. Sometimes I can't figure out how to cut two shots together or find quite the right frame to cut on, and Jay Rabinowitz will find it. So anyway, that is the end of my rambling on answering these questions. I thank everyone who sent in questions. I didn't get to all of them. If I did, this would be even more boring. But I feel like, kind of like it's a radio show. I wish I had some records to play, or a bed of music, or, some wax tracks to spin for y'all. Anyway, thank you very much for your questions, and that's over and out for me until hopefully the next Criterion release of one of my films.